Hebrews calls the law of a carnal commandment. Now elsewhere it's called a fleshly commandment. It's the same thing. This means that the law is directed to our flesh, not to our spirit. Now, we're told to live in the spirit, not in the flesh. So if we're living by something directed to our flesh, we can't be in the spirit. Duh. Isn't that right? Perhaps Paul says it best when he says, "For the law of the Spirit of life in Christ Jesus has made me free from the law of sin and death." Paul says that when we're in the flesh or living as a carnal Christian, then sins are produced by the law that we're trying to live by. It sounds silly, but it's the way it works. He calls this as being fruit unto death. He goes on to say that the law is the strength and the power of sin. Now this is why Paul says for us born-again Christians in Jesus to be dead to the law. He repeats this at least twice in different places, just so we don't miss it. But so many of us miss it anyway. We've got to be dead to the law to live to God. Now he infers if we live by law in our mind, then in our flesh we'll be sinners. That's the way we'll see ourselves. This is why he says we're cursed if we live by the law. Now we have a great promise from God from the mouth of Paul. He says in Romans that until the law was given, to Moses that is, sin was in the world, but sin is not imputed where there is no law. Now what this means is that sin was held against us when there was law. But when there wasn't law, which is before the law was given to Moses, sin was not held against us. Now today, the law has been taken away, as we're seeing in this third gospel coaching session. Now this being the case, sin is no longer held against us by God. Now you might say we Christians have what I call diplomatic immunity from sin here on earth because we're ambassadors of heaven. Now I discuss this in more detail in coaching session number 6. Hebrews says sin was under the old covenant, but it was not mentioned to us being against us in the new covenant. This is why the gospel is called the better new covenant. It is like the U.S. Constitution being better than the old Articles of Confederation. The gospel is like the constitution of God's kingdom here on earth, and we're told to live by God's constitution, which is his gospel.